and welcome to the Cognitive Edge. I'm Dr. Daniel Sable, and today we have a very special guest with us. We have Kristina Holzweiss, who's graciously gone out of her way to take some time to be here with us today to discuss a little bit about her um, career and the future of technology and so forth. So let's just kind of jump right into it. So, Christina, um, what drove you to love libraries the way you do?
Well, my first memory of libraries was when the bookmobile would come to visit my grandparents' house.
Yeah.
And I was basically raised by my grandparents. My mom had multiple jobs and she was divorced. So I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. And my grandparents were Ukrainian. My grandfather only had a fourth grade education,
Okay.
and my grandmother never went to school. And so my grandfather could write letters to family back in Europe. He could read the newspaper to my grandmother. And he knew a little bit of English, and I knew some Ukrainian, so we got along very well. But it was the bookmobile that would come, and it would stop right across the street from my grandparents' house, right in front of the school, and right in front of my grandparents' house, the elementary school that I went to. And so when the bookmobile came, that was amazing because I couldn't get to the public library that often when I was younger. And so to have this mobile library come to my neighborhood, and I could get on the bookmobile and take out whatever books I liked and return my books. It was amazing. It was an amazing experience. Now my grandparents, like I said, really did not know the language, and my grandmother did not read. But every time that bookmobile came, my grandfather would go into the garden and he'd pick some ripe tomatoes from his garden, and my grandmother would pick roses and she would wrap them up in aluminum foil, and my grandfather would put those tomatoes in a paper bag, and they would always give me those gifts to give to the librarian on the bookmobile because they knew that education was so important and access to information. So my very first memory of library is filled with just joy and learning that the access was so important. And so through the years, I've learned a lot about libraries. Before I even became a librarian, I had connections, and I realized how important they were. Later on, when I was in about high school, my friend's mother was a social studies teacher in the school that I went to. And she was Ukrainian also. I had a very tight-knit Ukrainian community. And one day she told us, all of us, my friends who were in town and my friends through the church, she told all of us, she said, go to your local public library and take out books about Ukraine, the culture, the language, cooking, take out books. And at the time, I thought that was very unusual. I'm Ukrainian. Why do I need to read books about my culture? Then I realized, as I am right now, weeding books from the library where I work now, she wanted us to circulate the books about Ukraine because she knew that books that don't circulate are weeded. And she knew that it was important to have those books on the shelves to see that they were circulating. So that was, I had no idea until years later what that really meant to go to the library to circulate those books.
Super smart.
Yeah, a very, very smart woman. So libraries need to have something for everyone, and we need to have a place where everyone feels that they belong, and where everyone has their voice heard. And that's what I learned over the years.
Yeah. I'm a big advocate of all different types of community events and inclusion, making sure that um, books are available not only in the library, but also brought out to the community. At one point, I had duties where I would drop books off at disabled people's homes so they can, still have their access because they enjoyed reading so much. So, I always had this drive to, like you said, to really just make the library something special for everybody.
Mhm.
And so I think that your story is really beautiful. It's a really nice story, and it's very heartwarming. It's perfect. You know, it's like a classical, um,
I think everyone has
Disney.
their library story.
Yeah,
Everyone has
yeah,
that story. And whether you think that libraries and librarians are obsolete, you remember as a child walking into the library for the first time.
yeah,
Everyone has that memory, whether it's your school library or your public library, whether you went there on a field trip or whether a family member brought you. You all have that memory as being a child, full of wonder about the library. Some of us have forgotten that sense of wonder, but we all have that library story within us.
you had brought up the bookmobile. As a child, I also had a bookmobile in my neighborhood. I grew up in Yonkers, and I guess years ago they had the resources to do that, and the Westchester Library System was doing it for a while, and then it kind of just fizzled away a little bit. So it would. I wonder how it would look now if something like that were to be re-engaged again.
Well,
Um,
that's my dream. My dream would be to have my own bookmobile and
yeah,
have a makerspace on it and have basically a mobile community service. That's actually my dream. I
yeah.
have a few more years until I retire.
I-
But I would love to have, a motor home and just travel around visiting libraries and again have my own bookmobile to just travel and learn about new people and visit new places, but also bring something to them.
Yeah, it's unique, and not to switch because this was a such a great conversation. But let me ask you another question here, because we're talking, about the future. Um, Over the next 3 years, where do you see us going? I mean, the next 1 to 3 years in terms of technology, in terms of maybe spaces or whatever you think. What do you gather from your many years of out, or of insight and what you know and so forth?
So I'm going to talk about my childhood and I'm going to date myself. It was the 70s and when I was a little kid in the elementary school and I had this dream. I had love-hate relationship with technology.
Right.
We had this machine called Systems 80 and we had to looking back on it now, I think we were piloting a program, but as a child, I didn't know what it was, but it was a machine
Yeah.
and you can call it a computer, but basically it was inside the machine was a record and they had these slides and you would have to sit there and have, I guess, individualized learning. And you had to schedule a time because there was a full class of children, and you had to make sure that you had used it somewhat during the week. That stressed me out because I just didn't feel a connection to it. It was a machine, and it stressed me out that I had to schedule the time, and I had to, I guess, do this work. So it really did stress me out. But on the other hand, when I was a kid, I always thought, how cool would it be to have something attached to my brain so I could download all the material I had gathered over the years because we learned so much and I didn't want to forget anything. So I figured, wouldn't that be so cool to download our brains and then to get more information? Again, this was the 70s. So there's my love-hate relationship with technology. Um, I think now, today, I love technology. I was going to be a computer science minor. I took 2 classes of Pascal, and then that was it because I didn't have any computer background.
Yeah.
So but I became Raspberry Pi certified, Mickey certified. So I had to grow into it over the years. So I just love technology. But I honestly believe that with the increased use of AI and technology and all of our screenagers, our
Right.
kids on their phones, I believe that libraries are going to be evolved into something that is community based. I think libraries are going to celebrate humanity even more. Now that I'm teaching elementary school students, I realize how innocent they are when they're younger, when they don't use technology, and how curious they are, and how excited they are. This past 2 weeks, we haven't circulated books because it's the end of the school year. And my kids are asking me, can we go book shopping? They're asking me for hardcover books.
It's
And it's amazing. And my 5th graders, I said, well, a few weeks ago, I said to my 5th graders, this is your last book shopping time. So make it a good one. Choose a book you're really going to want. And I had one student go into the picture book section and take out his favorite book. And then another followed, and another followed. So we were circulating that day to 5th graders, Pinkalicious, Fancy Nancy, Llama Llama, Click Clack Moo, Give a Mouse a Cookie. They loved it. And I wrote a letter to all my 5th graders, and I went through our circulation catalog, and I found the very first book that they took out in our elementary school, whether they came in as a kindergartner, or whether they just visited this year. And they were so excited to
amazing.
see that first book that they had taken out. And I think that's the power of libraries. Everything else is stuff.
Right.
But libraries, I think, are timeless. I've seen libraries with outdoor learning centers. I've seen libraries that lend out, anything from baking pans
Yeah.
to podcast equipment. I don't think that they're going to change so much that they won't be recognizable. I
Right.
really don't think so. I think we need libraries to stay the way they are in some ways. Yes, they'll
Right.
evolve, but maybe structurally, maybe there'll be some, maybe they'll become more sustainable, maybe there'll be more gardens. But I really think the swing is using all this technology, but having a space where you belong. So I think that there's an evolution, but I think there's also maybe the change is the change of maybe not tomorrow, the change of yesterday.
Yeah. I agree with you 100%. I think that there's getting to be too many things.
Mhm.
When we had the shift from during COVID from in person to online learning, I was right in the midst of it, and my job was basically background systems, connecting students at home to systems and so forth, working out all different IT issues around the library. And I saw so many different platforms and so many different apps and tools that I started wondering and worrying, like, how do we now distinguish between all these things? It's just too much. And I then started seeing different LMS providers competing for um, space, and the market really became flooded with apps that were now many obsolete, and people, school districts and vendors, and they were spending millions to try to grab some of that space that we now no longer use. So I think that what you're saying is 100% correct. It's I've seen it, I've witnessed it, and you're right. We can lend out everything. When I was working, I became injured, so had some surgery in my spine. Wasn't able to work too much, so I'm trying to get back in the game now. Um, but when I was working, I would, lend anything. I had a Cricut. I had, like I would do, like you said, the Raspberry Pis. We'd set up
Mhm.
pies. We would do different things. Um, I would, introduce the students to coding and to programming and so forth. And I had, for me, with the technology background, I kind of like grew into it slowly. I didn't start with programming. I started with like I know, and they do that a lot. What they do is I'll see that in higher ed, they'll dump kids in programming first,
Mm.
and it could be complex. That has to come after you have an understanding of why you're doing what you're doing,
Mhm.
and um, it should be intro to computer, small steps, not take you and put you right in the Copilot or right into, whatever type of program you're using, Java or Python. And so, these are problems. And, I guess that this is the way that, universities work. They want to put you into, whatever classes they can. But outside of that, I think that, we have we've come a long way.
We
We've
have.
definitely come a long way. We
You
have.
made me think of something, like, it is our human nature to
Right,
create.
right,
And whether you're creating music or you're creating through Cricut or you're creating through a computer,
right.
it is our nature to create. And I think that when we offer opportunities for our students to do that, where they are vested into their learning and they're creating something. We do a lot of community service work in my library, and we're using scissors and glue and cardboard, and we're creating and we're making. And I think a lot of kids who feel lost, they aren't making anything. And I don't mean by they have to physically make something, but I
Right,
feel like they don't feel like they're making a difference. And I
connection.
feel like if you're not making something, you're breaking something.
Right,
People need to feel that they have a purpose. And I feel like libraries can do that. You can go there, you can learn things that you've never learned before, you can meet up with people, you can meet people you never met before. Seriously is that social hub. We talk about Starbucks being that third place, but the library had been a third place for decades
yeah,
before Starbucks came around.
oh, yeah,
And I feel like the library is that third place. It is not that work there, it's not the home, it is that third place where many things can happen, and you don't have to pay to play.
yeah, yeah,
You could just walk in, even if you're not from that town, even if you don't have a library card, you could walk into a library and you could take a book off a shelf and you could just sit down and read it.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I really feel like it talks about equity, it's access, it's
mhm,
belonging, and it's access to information, I think is the big thing. But again, the one thing I think is so important is the creation.
yeah,
And we could talk about AI, we could talk about generative
right,
AI, we could talk about how things, I use AI, it makes my work more efficient.
sure,
I found some, everyone's like, oh, the cool things you can do with it.
yeah,
But I'm also stopping what I'm doing and I'm creating something. I'll pick up a craft or
right,
I'll help my children with their homework. I am active.
yes,
And I think that our children now, especially with those screens, with their phones, they're not creating, they're consuming. They're watching. They call it brain rot, and they're just sitting there and watching.
Mhm.
I think if we get back to creating, I think it'll give kids a purpose. It'll give people a purpose. And using technology or not, I'm not anti-technology. I love technology. There are
100%.
kids who want to use Makey, let them do it. The kids who want to program, the kids who want to build with cardboard. We need to
Mhm.
give those kids the space to create something.
Yeah. Just open up, let them go, and
Mhm.
that would be it. My local library, they do a comedy night.
Oh, that's
And they have
cool.
they have, people from the town go down, and they they try, and some people are pretty, they're intuitive, they really get it, and, they're able to make people laugh, and so it's just to use the library as space in that so many different manners now. It's such a great thing, so, alright, so to end, I wanna thank you. I really do. I wanna thank you, Christina, for coming on. I don't know how to repay you in so many ways, but it was lovely talking to you and
Same here.
lovely having you, and I thank you again,
You're welcome. Just
and
keep doing your good work. That's how you
I
repay.
appreciate
You
it,
pay
and
it forward.
I
Pay it
hope
forward.
that I try to do it, and you know, it's just hard getting rolling, but
Yep, yep. Well,
we'll get it,
the first step is the hardest. The first step of anything is the hardest. Once you
and
get over that, everything else is much easier.
it's
The first
great
step is the
advice.
hardest, and you've gotten there. So, congratulations on this podcast. It
Thank
was
you.
wonderful speaking with you.
Yes,
And you made me think about what I really think the future is. Really made me think about that. So,
I
thank you so
appreciate
much
that.
for that.
Yes. Alright. It was lovely talking to you.
Okay, have a wonderful week.
You too.
Bye bye.